Yeah, no, I'm not easily impressed, but so the first thing we do is that we just like smile or just kind of, okay, that's great. Great. So welcome to What You're Craving. Molly here. I'm fangirled out a little bit because I have Kimberly Johnson on the show today. And I'd like to say your bio should have the word goddess in it, but we can talk about that later. But Kimberly Johnson is a sexological body worker. That's a mouthful. A somatic experiencing practitioner, a yoga teacher. A yoga trainer, a postpartum advocate, and a single mom. She helps women heal from birth injuries, gynecological surgeries, and sexual boundary violations. She's the author of Early Mothering Classic, The Fourth Trimester, as well as the upcoming Call of the Wild, How We Heal Trauma, Awaken Our Power, and Use It for Good, which I am slowly devouring right now and so in love with and cannot wait to talk to you about. I can't wait to get it in my physical hands and get all the Post-its and the highlights. And I'm in love. And so this book, Call of the Wild, and Kimberly's work is absolutely incredible. And might I just say before we start talking, so What You're Craving is a podcast about the underlying issues of why we turn to addiction and binge eating and self-hate and body harm and if anybody has the answer to this question, it is Kimberly Johnson. And I am so excited to hear all that you have to say. So, but maybe before we get to the guts, we want to know a little bit about you, to the extent that you want us to know about you.
Sure. Well, thanks for the introduction. I'm trying not to get I think somatics in general get put in a woo category, and I don't want to get put in the woo, so I'm not going to add goddess to the bio, but
I appreciate it, actually. Yeah, no, right. Keeps you grounded.
That might work against me.
Yeah, no, I really hear, you know what? I'm going to strike goddess from my bio, the bio I have in my head of you. Great idea. Yes.
Yeah, so based on my own personal path, that the kind of key points on my path that I touch on a little bit in this book called The Wild. I don't go into my own personal story as deeply as I do in my first book, that was The Fourth Trimester on Motherhood. But this book is really born out of experience of being a woman and reckoning with power, and then birthing a daughter. And now my daughter is 13. And then working with hundreds of women. I'm a structural integration practitioner, so I know how to work with connective tissue with my hands.
Right.
And when I was healing myself from a birth injury, I realized how neglected certain parts of the body are from body work and from our sort of collective awareness. And so I was willing to go into those spaces with women, work hands on, hands in. And I just realized how much of what we categorize as a mental health problem is actually trauma that's in the body. And the body is telling us something, and we're labeling it anxiety, or we're labeling it depression, or we're labeling it autoimmune disease.
Yeah.
But actually it's an incomplete cycle in the nervous system. And I was lucky enough women trusted me with that process, that I was able to understand that there was a bit of a sequence that most women need to go through to claim our agency and our power. And that's the sequence that I called Activate Your Inner Jaguar. And we can talk more about Jaguar if you want to, but
I want to talk a lot about Jaguar energy. Absolutely. Okay. I think how you explain it is so fabulous. I also think how you explain animals is so fabulous. The idea that animals don't have trauma, such an interesting point that you made in the book.
Wild animals. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I think, to me, I'm continually looking to that. And that's not my discovery. That was discovered and created with Peter Levine in the early 70s, who's the founder of somatic experiencing, which is the kind of trauma work that I learned. That, right now, you and I are talking, it's February 25th, 2021. We're 11 months into a pandemic, which is a collective immobilization. We can't move around as much as we can normally move around. And what we know about trauma is that the reason why wild animals don't experience trauma, wild animals experience devastation, they experience very difficult circumstances, but the reason that it doesn't become traumatic, which means it doesn't live in their body as a groove or a habit that they're continually relating to, is because they're allowed to complete that experience.
Wow.
So when a gazelle arises and or escapes, either freezes and collapses and then wakes up, or escapes, there's going to be a shaking mechanism that happens that's helping that sympathetic charge, the inability to fight or to actually get away. It's going to help it get out of its system.
Yep.
And as humans, we have this social nervous system that makes us very aware of how people view us and what they're noticing. And that oftentimes comes as inhibition on the natural physiological cycles that need to complete themselves, and then becomes an internalized pattern, personality structure, behavioral habit.
Yeah. I love this social nervous system idea. I think it's such an important piece of understanding like ourselves as people and how we behave and why we behave that way. And I love, can you tell us more about that? Like this idea of the social nervous system?
Sure. Most of us learned in high school or junior high, whenever you learned about the nervous system, you learned that the sympathetic system is fight or flight and the parasympathetic is rest or digest.
Right.
That's apples to oranges. That's not comparing apples to apples, because the sympathetic nervous system, when it feels safe, is what motivates us, wakes us up in the morning, gives us healthy drive and focus. And our parasympathetic system, when safe, has this rest or digest response, in addition to other ones. If we were looking at how we respond under threat, what polyvagal theory brought forward by Stephen Porges in 1994 was that the vagus nerve, which is an actual nerve, which actually lives in our body. I think sometimes the nervous system is getting to be like the new black, and it's catchy.
So the new black, it's like
and
mindfulness.
Everyone's talking about
totally,
it, right?
Totally.
And so then people forget that like it's based on actual nerves. Like it's not a spiritual principle.
Right.
There's actually nerves in our body that coordinate these activities.
Right. Exactly.
So the parasympathetic system under stress does not rest or digest. It freezes or collapses.
Mm-hmm.
Now we have a whole other tier that polyvagal theory also brought to the surface, which is the social nervous system, which especially for the listeners of your podcast, for your work, for my work, where we deal primarily with women, is especially important, because the social nervous system is the most recent of the systems evolutionarily, or as they say in more complex terms, phylogenetically.
Ooh.
That social nervous system is based on an attachment system through mother-baby dyad. So it's what makes us able to care. It gives us the superpower of knowing what the young needs in the survival of the species.
Wow.
But the other thing that it does is it makes us very, very good facial readers. It makes us hyper attuned to cues. And so we're wondering, does that person agree, not agree? If they don't agree, am I in danger? Because if I'm separated from my tribe, that's a big threat. I can't survive alone. I need to be together.
Wow.
So it's where a lot of comparison and competition lives. So if you, in the social nervous system, if you feel safe, what's happening there is like sexually, that's where afterglow is. That's where oxytocin lives. It's where we can be in open communication. It's also where differentiation lives. So it means I can be different and I can be myself, and I still belong. So my belonging doesn't depend on sameness, doesn't depend on conformity. And the shadow side of that, or, that's kind of a Jungian term, but like the flip side of the social nervous system under threat is either fawning or fitting in. So fawning means approximating the threat, and fitting in means camouflaging. And I'm just going to do what everybody else does because I'm too afraid that if I become the tall poppy, or if I express a viewpoint that's not similar to my social milieu, that I could get my head lopped off, or that I'm literally not going to survive.
Wow.
So we each have default nervous system propensities, which is really one of my goals of the book, is for us to have a felt sense experience of what it feels like in our system when that's happening. So then we can
meaning that
articulate
like the accurate way to feel, or like knowing how you're feeling is healthy. Like, what does that mean? Like a felt nerve, help me understand that.
So felt sense is a term that was coined actually in psychoanalysis, which is really interesting, I think.
Sure is.
And it was because they did a study at University of Chicago about why does some therapy work and other therapy doesn't work? $1 million question. Wouldn't we all like to know? And in this case, they said because the people who are in their felt sense, which means as they're talking, they're direct reporting what's happening in that moment. They're not reporting the past. They're not. So it's like the difference of me saying, like, I say to somebody, well, what are you noticing? And they go, well, I'm just like really afraid. And well, are you afraid right now?
Wow.
And they're like,
good question. No, right. I'm not sure.
Afraid right now. And then, oh, well, what does it feel like to not be afraid in this moment? Because afraid is a label, right? Fear is a very real thing. It's important. We have it, and it's just a natural part. That's another part of my book, is like, we're all in all of these states.
Well, I love that part of your book.
It's not good or bad.
This thing that you're saying, which I wholeheartedly agree with, it's who I am as a person. Like, you're like, listen, we don't need to be being in Zen state all the time. Like, I love what you're saying. The Zen state's not like this ideal that we're all just sitting on the mountaintop, like meditating. Like, right, I have like big feelings.
Right. Yeah. And you're an expressive person. You have a personality. And that's part of also the feminine, right? Like there's so many layers to it. But the felt sense is when, like, if I'm communicating to you, I mean, right now I'm kind of in flow just because I'm so passionate about what I'm talking about. And so it's coming out. But if I was communicating, and to me, that is an embodied state as well. Absolutely. I feel that I'm fully I can feel my feet. I can feel my legs. I can feel my abdomen. I'm like communicating from my whole self. But if I were to report to you like, oh, yeah, I'm noticing that I have more weight on my left foot than my right foot. Okay, I just took a deeper breath. So that's kind of external. And then if I go like a layer deeper, the felt sense communication was like, oh, I noticed that I feel kind of a heaviness on the right side of my abdomen. And then I might give you an image like, well, it's kind of like if I had a vase and there was just more sitting on the right side than the left side. And so if you read the reports of when they defined the term felt sense, it was like people reporting in real time what they're feeling and sensing, not thinking their feelings, not thinking they're sensing, but actually a bottom up, like this is what's happening. And there's almost a sense when you're reporting a felt sense, there's almost a sense of surprise because you haven't analyzed it. It's not going to be the thing you always feel. It's like, right. Oh no, but actually right now, this is what's happening.
What do you think about the impact of social media on the social nervous system when you're talking about these shadow sides? That sounds like it's a pretty bad idea.
Yes. So I am on social media quite a bit. I run my business off of social media. So I'm not somebody who's going to say something because I don't actually use it or have a relationship to it. It definitely is heightening a sense of comparison and competition.
Right.
And it's, as we know, it's giving us a very prejudiced view of it's reinforced. It's an echo chamber of our own reality because it's only showing us the things that we've chosen to see. So we like my Facebook feed is like all vulva all the time. I mean, at any moment I might just like see a baby being born, now they've got a little thing you have to press, but it doesn't always work. Like, I'm just like, whoa, wow, that was a lot even
I'd like to come over. That sounds so fun.
Oh, well,
this is like, I'm like, compare and despair. I really want your feed now. Mine's like a lot of like quotes and like I have a lot of dogs though, like a lot of puppies.
Okay. Well, that's good. Warm. I mean, that's an oxytocin.
Yeah. It's a lot of oxytocin on mine too. I hear you. Yeah. But that comparison piece sounds really hard. Like we're up against.
And we have to know though, because some of us are really prone to that and others of us are less prone to it.
Right.
So it's like, we have to know, oh, I'm doing that. Like I'm in a fitting in response right now, or I'm in a fawning response. And then from there to make a choice. It's not that it's never going to happen. It's just like in the book, I talk about, well, if you are in this place, then what's your next step? But
Totally.
this really comes from the inside out. It's not like, I think you were mentioning you do DBT, which is very much it's behavioral. So
Right.
behavioral is like, you start with your mind, you have some checklists, and you adhere to the checklist, which has a lot to do with willpower. And the way that I work is like underneath willpower, because when the cycles start to complete, then you are actually drawn to the thing that will be life enhancing. You're drawn to
Absolutely.
the thing, you're able to feel satiated. You don't have to have an external imposition of rules, because your animal body will go towards the vitality or the
Yeah.
impulse.
And I think the thing about DBT, which I do love, is really there is the concept of the wise mind, which is really being able to tap in to the inner wisdom inside and listen. And I wrote in my book when I was, I was writing skills and I was writing this and all the stuff about DBT and sort of learning how to not use food as your primary coping skill in life. And these two parts, right? But one of them just says like, hey, if you can't do this, it's probably not that you can't do this. It's probably that you have trauma. And let's go get that. It felt like the most important thing I wrote, like in the whole book, because I had
Mhm.
spent so many years in the chair, with people being like, I can't remember what happened. And I don't know. And and watching that sort of reinforce the snow groove of the diet trauma and all of the stuff, watching the trauma and the trauma and the trauma, I was like, we got to figure out something else here. And it's when I actually got really interested in sensory motor psychotherapy and EMDR and all of those other methods that, I think behaviorism will take you somewhere. And I think when it's trauma, to not treat the trauma is to not complete or not be able to get the work done. And the last thing I want people to think is that they can't. I don't think anybody can't do it. I mean, and I think that's the willpower piece, that if you fail at this, it's you, and it isn't.
And it's a much broader, if we want to call it an issue, however we want to label it, we could label it a problem, but it's just where we find ourselves.
Yeah.
It's a much broader place, because in the social nervous system, how would we deal with food? We would eat together. We would share the preparation of food. We would
Yeah.
sit down and have a big variety, and we'd be able to choose from that. And it wouldn't happen in a hidden context, not because you chose not to hide it, because it just simply wouldn't
Right.
it wouldn't
Because you're
happen,
like on the
because
kibbutz, right?
right. And we would be caring for each other. And one day someone would cook something, and the other, and it would probably be cooking something that had to do with what you grew that was near
Yeah,
you. So
exactly.
the same goes with sexuality and birth. We can't imagine that we're in a gap. We're in a liminal space as a culture right now with so many things where we know what we're doing is not really working. And specifically women's health is showing us that. Um, Autoimmune conditions, and as you know, like, food is matter comes from mater is mother, like our relationship with mother and the
Yeah.
feminine.
Yeah.
So when it comes to sexuality, it's like, how can we, yes, it is, we do have our own, we are responsible for our own organism, our own matter, our own mater, but also it is happening in a social context.
Yeah.
So I'm really passionate about, that's my hope with the book, is like giving people a new language, giving people like a new template where they could move into interaction in a real time way, so that you don't feel like you have to go heal your trauma first. We all have traumas.
I love
Um,
that. I
and
love that.
it's not going to work. Like, there's not just some magic day. I mean, for me, there was a time where I felt like I was underwater most of the time, and then
Right.
I was above water most of the time, and now I live above the water, so I remember what that felt like.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that there's still not stresses, and that life isn't still happening, like the highs
Yeah.
and the lows.
Well, I always think about that with people that I don't know if it's our culture, like our Western culture, but everybody thinks that everything's going to be done, right? Like I forgive and we're done. And I go to trauma therapy for a year and then I never, ever, ever get activated again. And it's like sometimes Tara Brach talks about this double wounding. Like sometimes I think, I'm sure you agree, like it's bad. And then what makes it worse is the shame we carry about the like it coming back, or having a feeling that feels old, or I feel like a failure of the treatment. And it's like the softening to so much of this, I think, is the biggest idea for a lot of people that I
Definitely. I
know.
mean, I think that's what I'm hoping, is that because the way out of a parasympathetic freeze or collapse is presence and unshaming,
Mm.
and being willing to stand in our own experience. And we harm ourselves in those states as well, right? Like we have it's we have this sense in our culture that we want to know who's to blame, whose fault is it,
Right.
and that somehow that will solve our own internal experience. And because we have been very disempowered, I mean, you see a movie like Bombshell where we're just seeing it in real time. If
Right.
people haven't watched that, it's a movie about Megyn Kelly and the Fox newsroom. And you see all of the women's varying responses to power, to the very real desire to get your message out into the world and be given something, and have somebody that's requiring totally inappropriate things. But how inappropriate is it? And how have you been groomed? And what are we willing to trade? And this is the reality of the culture that we've built and inherited.
Yeah.
So it's not that all that's not going to just go away. But what we can do is activate our own inner predators and huntresses so that we can restore those other responses. And then we just know inside of ourselves that we have that self-protective capacity.
Mm.
And in real time, we don't have to go back to every last old thing that's happened to us, because frankly, I think that's why a lot of psychotherapy isn't working.
Me
Because
too.
how long would it take to go through every transgression and every
Well, and analysis paralysis at some point, right? Like how long am I going to sit here and talk about the story until I go and change it, right?
yeah.
And I
And
think
it's it can be addictive in and of
so
itself.
addictive.
But
So
I love therapy, and I'm not saying people shouldn't have it. And
me
again,
too.
I mean, I love therapy. I love going. I don't think there's anything wrong with me for wanting to go to therapy. I just think that we have to also understand that therapy is another way that our culture used to have inbuilt witnessing and eldership. Like
Oh,
that like we don't have to
and the
outsource and
rituals
pay
are
for
all
everything.
gone, right? All the
Right.
rituals are gone. That's a
So
great
again,
line
it's
in
like,
your book, by the way.
which one?
I wrote it down. Earth-based
Oh,
cultures have built-in traditions to integrate trauma, and that we've lost so many of these built-in rituals that we used to have, and especially during the pandemic, that helped us to actually feel the feelings and complete the cycle. I feel like, so when I got out of all of my addictions, I just thrived in I found that I needed to be in community. I needed to be with people. I needed to go study shamanism. I needed to, and like, you can't get me out of a moon circle. And it's because that line really resonated with me, because it made sense of why I need to, like, always be doing things with people all the time. And I remember when pandemic started, I went and visited my godchildren, and it was before, all this. And we sort of made the idea, okay, we'll just see each other and that'll be it, but we won't touch, and we won't, and we all were masked. I cry telling the story, and talk about, like, trauma. It was
mm,
so traumatic for me to be so incomplete and have, like, to not complete all the things that I wanted to do. I didn't get to see any facial
yep,
expressions. I didn't get to hug anybody. And
yep.
I was sleeping for like 2 days. I was so exhausted from that experience. And I mean, reading your book, I understood why, but reading your book, it made it so clear why. I also really want to hear you talk to us about exhaustion, women and exhaustion.
Mm,
If I can tell you how many friends I have, but how many people I treat with eating disorders who and addictions, who are nourishing and nurturing with food because they're so overdoing and so exhausted, and then they're either collapsing or overdoing. I'm just so interested in everything you have to say about that.
one thing I think that's amazing about being a woman is that we have all of these cycles. So if we're talking about trauma as completing a cycle, we have so many opportunities to complete them. So, for me, postpartum was this crazy underworld journey that I felt completely unprepared for, and to me showed that there was a total rupture in intergenerational wisdom. And I was able to realize that every period that I had after that was a chance, because a period is a mini birth and a mini postpartum period, that if I cared for myself during that time, I could repair what I didn't have in the postpartum time. And even if someone's not bleeding anymore, we have the moon that's also an infradian rhythm that's a beautiful reflection of our internal moon cycles.
Right.
If we're living out of sync with our own nature, it will inherently drain us of life force. If we're able to honor those rhythms, then it enhances our life force.
And
how
would we ideally, but ideally, like if you got to write the handbook on how a woman takes care of themselves in a cyclical way, what would you say? Like, what would you say we are doing, and what would you say we're not doing?
Well, I don't think I'm the total expert on this. I think Elisa Vitti has written a lot about this in Woman Code and in the Flow, because she's really tapped into the hormonal parts of things. But what I know is more seasonal. So taking into account, and I do still bleed. So I am still in relationship with when I have energy, how I exercise in this part of my cycle up until ovulation, and then how I exercise from ovulation to the bleed. What conversations I'm prepared to have in each side of those cycles.
Wow.
What I would require of myself and food. Like I can go with less calories and skipping a meal or two if that happened to happen in the first half of my cycle. Later on, no, you technically need 275 more calories in that part of the cycle. There would be a built-in rest day. For me, I prefer to have the rest day before my bleed, because I actually resume energy once I get a bleed. But for many people, it's like the first 2 days of the cycle, just
right. But everything you're saying is like, I know zero people who do this. You know what I mean? Like I know zero, like if that is really how our system needs to be, which
it's because we're living in a circadian world where that's based on a male 24-hour cycle and how their hormones work. So yeah, it's shocking because everything we do is based on that.
It brought a tear. Like I was like, wow, if this is ideal, I know nobody, maybe except for you, that is even coming close to this ideal. And no wonder we're so exhausted. Like no wonder.
Yeah. I mean, we have to do it imperfectly because we're not going to be able to do it all, because we can't, if we were living together, and I'm not trying to glorify, because I didn't live in a tribe. So I actually have no idea how that, I'm sure there's tons of conflict and interpersonal shits and right. I know that we're like still humans.
It might be like a good, like Bravo show. Like we don't know.
That's true.
We don't know.
Although I have had really good experiences of living communally with other adults as a mother. And it is legitimately much easier to do that than
I think I worked at sleepaway camp. I went to sleepaway camp and worked at sleepaway camp through the age of 25, maybe even later. Actually, the best time of my life is living communally. Absolutely. I mean, it's, it is true about the tribe, and I do love what you're saying is the most resonant to me, because I am the queen of the harm reduction. I always believe something is better than nothing, but I do think we're shining a light here on how culture doesn't support how we ideally want to be. And any step close to ideal is going to be a step closer to ideal.
One baby step, right? Like just a little bit more rest. We don't give ourselves permission to rest.
Right.
So any amount of rest is going to be better than that internal voice that's just driving us hard all the time and believing that like our worth is only related to our productivity and that which can be seen. Like if we're going to honor this, we have to honor that which cannot be seen.
Well, I think when I think about what this podcast is about, which is these underlying issues, I mean, we are literally talking about the things that make us turn to these unhealthy behaviors. And I even mean body obsession, swiping, all of it, all of these distractions, because maybe we are tired, right? Like I know so many people who get really sick, and that's the only time they'll allow themselves to be tired or rest, right? So it's sort of like, what would it be like if you just understood, oh, I get my period, I need a rest day, upfronting that allows for me to have a much more rhythmic, peaceful life. I mean,
And it's a long-term investment. We don't really have, our culture is very like short-term oriented. So we think, well, then I'm going to give up this and I'm not going to do that. But also living in rhythm with your cycle in that way allows you to not have to rely on big pharma for things like contraception.
right.
Because then you actually know what's happening with your body, and you're empowered to share that information. And the people around you can support you in that time then, rather than demand more things from you.
Ooh,
I mean, in my
love that.
business, I like to know when the people that are working with me are on having their cycle, or, like, it's like that helps me to help them, because if they're caring for that now, they're not going to have a million sick days later, because then they're exhausted or getting migraines or all the other things that happen when we're not listening sooner.
That's so beautiful. So what about these people who are listening and saying, well, I'm really tired and I'm really overwhelmed and I'm turning to food and I'm turning to this, but I just don't think, I don't have anything traumatic that happened to me. What would you say?
Well, I would go back to what trauma is.
Yeah. What is it?
Trauma is that unprocessed, incomplete cycle of the nervous system that lives in our system. So
Right.
I consider it like a record skip. So a record plays and the needle goes around the record. And if there's a trauma, there's a skip. And then you go around and then it's going to skip in the same place every time. And so when you heal trauma, you just get a full revolution, and then you can hear your actual song again.
Yeah.
So I would say, it's kind of, you're a therapist, people are like, well, my parents are actually pretty great.
Right.
My parents are freaking awesome. I love
Right.
my parents. They actually live down the street from me. They're hilarious. They like stop by sometimes in the middle of my classes, or like my dad might come over right now.
Oh, that would be so fun. An extra
It's
guest.
totally possible. Yeah. But I have trauma from them.
Right.
And
we don't get to choose it, right? We don't get to choose what looks good and feels good and what.
It also doesn't have to be, I'm not blaming them for it.
I love that.
But we can't bypass it either. So in our phase of healing, we have to decide, at some point we have to realize I was a victim to that.
Right.
At some point we have to survive it and know how we are in relationship. And then we have jaguar phase, where we are in our felt sense lived experience. And it's not only in relationship to the wounding, right? That's the complicated thing about being a therapist like you. It's like, how do you be a therapist to the wound that was yours and not be in relationship to that wound all the time?
Yeah. Something I love that you say in the book, which may not be yours, is that there's also these quotidian transgressions that can happen in your life that can build up to form a real trauma reaction to things, which reminded me of so many things. But as it pertains to eating disorders, like I just know that when I meet people, first of all, I can never believe people like come to me because it's like their 80th time trying to heal. And I just think like people are such rock stars, like I'm just always like, wow. Or someone bought a book about sugar and I'm like, you're amazing. I can't even believe you tried again. Like human resilience is incredible. But just the idea of like trying this like fast and then like binging after and doing that, so making a promise to yourself and then like not do like, I would imagine that's a trauma. Like that turns into a story, turns into an unrepeated cycle, everything that we're saying. And so when I thought about that, and then I thought about like just the larger exponential things that happen to us in life that we ignore. No
Yeah,
wonder.
I think we need to, most people, like everything, trauma makes us see polarized opposites, and it doesn't let us see nuance. So we have this either like, oh my God, I'm so traumatized, or like, oh, I don't have trauma, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yes.
We all have it. Like what I'm talking about with my mom. My mom is a wonderful human. She had an alcoholic father. She's very hypervigilant. She had a rageful alcoholic father. She is extremely sympathetic dominant. Does things. She's a super producer. I remember when I was a teenager, I would wake up at like 8:30 and she'd already have lived like an entire day by 8:30 and I was just waking up.
God.
And she's a steamroller. So she's like, if I say, hey, mom, if she goes, well, let's go out to eat or something, and I'll be like, okay, I feel like Mexican. She's like, I'll meet you at sushi. Like she just like shouldn't even hear what I said. Mom,
I
like
are really similar. Your mom.
Yellow. She's like, how about purple? I'm like, Okay. So I learned that it didn't matter what I said. So I stopped having preferences because it was easier to not have a preference. Well,
Right.
not having a preference is a parasympathetic state, to be in confusion and disorientation and to not know what I wanted. So
Mm.
then when it came with a lot of other situations, like I was bullied in high school, I have red hair. I had freckles, glasses, really smart, known for being smart. And I had a group of boys who would scream fire crotch at me every day when I came to school. And I
Right.
don't know why I mean, it's interesting to think about, like, why would they choose like genitals to be the thing? But of course, that was like more embarrassing rather than just kind of like, that's ridiculous. Um, but I was really afraid of them, and I would come in school a different side,
Mm.
um, and so that confused me about, like, well, what's wrong with me? Like, why am I the one that is getting, like, why do I deserve this? Why aren't they saying it to my friends? Like, what about me is that thing? And so then by the time I got to college, I was completely confused about, am I attractive and am I not attractive? Um, I'd never really been on a date before that. 3 guys asked me out in the same week, the first week of college. And I was like, oh my God, what do I do? Am I allowed to do this? Like, what
Wow.
does this mean about me? And I questioned so much of myself because I had never been able to say, this is what I want and this is how I want it, and have that actually happen.
Right.
So I'm not saying like my mom caused me to have sexual assault. I'm just saying here are the breadcrumbs
Yeah.
and the patterns that led it to happen. That when I was in a situation where I instinctually knew this is not okay, I don't feel safe, I had all these voices in my head saying, well, but your friends know this person and he's on this team, and so he
Right.
must be okay. And you're paranoid. And why are you so paranoid? Instead of being in my animal nature that was telling me, this is wrong. Like, don't do this. Don't go here. Don't step one more step on this path, and betraying that wildness in myself because of the goodness of, like, well, I don't want anyone, like, why am, just all of the kind of patterning of keeping things, not making a ruckus, not making a big deal out of something that ended up being a much bigger deal because it changed the course of my whole life.
Yeah.
So,
And I love so many things you're saying, not even especially, but the idea that small things add up and impact our nervous system, right? They impact how we respond to things in an unnatural way, is what I hear you saying. And
well,
then we have
how many women, every woman has experienced a sexual transgression. How many, I
absolutely
mean, on a smaller large scale,
right,
it's the water we're swimming in. So
absolutely.
that was my beef with trauma, quote unquote trauma school, was like, everybody wants to talk about CPTSD, complex PTSD, which is like
Right.
when you have more than one kind of trauma. Well, grow up a woman in this culture. Just check
We all
that
have it.
box.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So yes, yes, yes. And so I think it's such an important point for people though who, sort of just say like, well, it can't be me. I can't be relating to this because it's not big enough. Like what you're saying is doesn't have to be big enough. It just has to be. And even just functioning, it's likely that uh the record has skipped no matter who you are.
Definitely. But also that's part of humanness. That's not like, it's not a scarlet letter.
I
It's not
love
like, oh,
that.
now I'm going to wear the capital T. It's like you're wearing the capital H, human, and hopefully you're wearing a capital A that's animal, but then you don't need a letter. Uh,
I want to make us shirts that say that with capital H's on them. So how did you get into this jaguar energy? I love it. Living life beyond your trauma.
I
What do you
noticed you
mean?
came with your animal print.
I didn't know if this was jaguar or not, but like I
No,
wanted to like honor the process. Do you know
it
what I
looks
mean?
like it's more zebra to me.
I felt like it was maybe cheetah, like who knows? But I just yes,
Yeah, they
namaste
riffed
jag
on it.
namaste jaguar is what I wanted to say. Like this is, just
Perfect.
wanted to help you and shout you out.
Thank you. So Jaguar for me, I'm not really a woo spiritual person who would like take on another name. I was given my name and that's what it is. But the Jaguar thing happened. I did live in Brazil for 8 years. My daughter's Brazilian, her dad's Brazilian. At one point in my history, I recognized in myself, oh, I am really identified with prey energy. I watched a video of I don't know, I think it was a wolf and a rabbit in quote unquote trauma school, somatic experiencing school. And I thought everybody would just be rooting for the rabbit. I thought everybody would just be like I was like, oh my God, get away. No, here comes the wolf. And after they turned it off, 30% of the people identified with the wolf and 70 with the rabbit. And then it was a huge light bulb moment for me where I actually liked the people in my class. And so I was like, wow, these are not bad people, because I would have thought someone who identified with the wolf was a bad person.
Huh. Interesting.
And so as a result of that, I started investigating, oh, well, maybe that's why I'm a vegetarian. Oh, maybe that's where all my activism comes from. Maybe that's why I make all these choices, because I'm so identified with the prey side of things.
Huh.
And not that those are bad things to be. It was just like, wow, this is just kind of all lines up with this one way of seeing the world.
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps if I was able to see the world from this other side of the natural spectrum of predator prey, which is just the natural world,
right,
maybe there's something there for me. I realized I'd never had a male therapist since I was in high school. I had one time. And I hired a somatic experiencing person whose physicality was a lot like my perpetrator. And
wow,
he was really big, really broad shoulders, and he was a dancer and a martial artist. And I knew that he would be able to be in that space with me. So in his office, he would get a broomstick and like chase me with the broom and like see how my system would respond to it. And he would stalk me and see how I was able to restore those responses of like holding my ground and being in that space.
wow.
So one day I came to him, a friend of mine had told me that my daughter was really authoritarian. She was 5 at the time. And as I mentioned earlier, with my mom being like so dominant, I had kind of gotten into a relationship with my daughter without knowing it, where like I sort of just did what she wanted.
Huh.
And because there were only 2 of us, it wasn't really that obvious to me, because being someone whose personality structure became very flexible, to me, it was like, oh, well, I don't really care what we do, so we'll just do what you want. So I took that to my therapist, and I was saying to him, feeling really sorry for myself, and oh, I'm a single mom and I have to be the unconditional love, and I have to be the disciplinarian, and like the discipline, it's so exhausting. And he just looked at me and said, like, did you know that I'm from the Amazon? And I said, no. And he said, you're a jaguar. Look at you. He's like, you are golden. You're spotted because of like my skin tone and my freckles. Yeah. And he said, it's the mothers that teach the cubs to hunt.
Wow.
It's not the fathers that teach the cubs to hunt. So go home and watch mother jaguars with their cubs and see how they are and start imitating them. And so I did. I went home and I started watching them, and I started wrestling way more with my daughter, and I started pinning her down and started showing her physically that I was dominant and that she could be safe in my, and of course I didn't hurt her at all. And I never held her down or like kept her from getting breath. Right. In fact, she usually really liked it. She liked that feeling of the like safety scrapping. Of being dominated. Yeah. And so I think mapping onto your earlier question about exhaustion, a lot of times when our fight response isn't intact and we're overriding it again and again, that's really exhausting. That's that feeling that your foot is on the gas and the handbrake is pulled at the same time.
Wow.
Because you're running both programs and you don't have time for the deactivation.
Isn't that life right now, huh? It's amazing. So we're all trying to get jaguar energy.
For me, it's jaguar. It could be for someone, some of my students really relate to wolves. It's the energy of the predator, the hunter, because we have to know that we can protect ourselves, we can protect our children, and that we have that capacity in us.
Yeah.
Not just in our brain, but actually in our system. Right. When women would come to my office and I would say, okay, they would be in rabbit mode. They were coming to tell me about a terrible experience they had at the doctor, or a terrible sexual experience they had where they froze and they couldn't say what they needed to say, and they weren't able to move the way they wanted to move. And I would say, okay, well, how about you be the wolf and I'll be the rabbit? They would go into rabbit mode. They weren't able to be the wolf.
Yeah.
And so that's the book, is like teaching someone how to be that. People are freaked out because we've moralized it. So we say predator is bad and prey is good. But if you actually have predator energy, you don't walk around the world as a predator. That's feral.
You just have it, right? It's in your
It's
pocket
just
just in case.
inside.
Yeah,
You don't, it's
totally.
like a great martial artist. They don't go around picking fights. Like
Right.
you have it. The first thing you learn in martial arts is get out of a situation if you can.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if you need to, you know that you have it. And I'm not suggesting everyone go take martial arts classes. This is something that's a little bit more subtle than that, although that's not a terrible thing to
Not a
do.
terrible idea.
Yeah. So it's whatever that means to you to inhabit your ferocity. Could you show your fangs? Could you tell someone to fuck off? Could you tell someone to back up?
Yep.
Can you say, I wanted that before, I don't want that anymore?
Yep.
I do want this, because that's also jaguar energy. Jaguar energy is like, I've got this in my sights and I'm not stopping until I get it. It's not aggressive. It's not alpha female. It's like, it's just so clear because it's animal energy. Like, and then when you get it, you're satisfied by it.
I'm satisfied
You
just
satiate.
listening to it, Kimberly. I'm like, yes, let's go. Let's say what we
Yeah.
need. And I think anyway, the amount of people I've talked to in my life, I've I've listened to millions of binges, and so many of them come, alcohol, whatever, come from, well, I meant to say, I needed to pay the bill and I couldn't say that I needed it, or I said yes, but I meant to say no, and I couldn't say no, or I couldn't have I mean, it's all of this, rabbit stuff that you're talking about, and I love this. And I love the idea that, right, it's not this predator energy. It doesn't mean we're walking around slicing everyone and putting our fangs in. It's just, it's available. And to know that it's available means that you can feel embodied and empowered.
And also then you get to be in true surrender also. So
Hmm.
then when you're resting, you're really relaxed. You're
Oh,
really
I love
resting.
that.
You see jaguars, they don't go around, they're not hunting all the time. They're laying on trees. They're falling asleep. They're playing with their cubs. And then, perked up, then they see what they want and they go for it. And then sometimes they get it and sometimes they don't get it. And then they're able to just go back to sleep or have sex
I
or
love
whatever.
that. It's like that
And
idea of one-minded, right? You're really doing the thing that you need to be doing, even if that is amazing. Yeah.
and it's efficient energetically. And I
Sure
think
is.
that's what's so hard with the exhaustion is like running our energy when we feel like we're not getting a return from it. It's not really making a difference,
Right.
right? That's exhausting. So I don't think we need to, again, like I hope, and what most of my students say is like, learning this should help you feel less self-loathing and less self-blame,
Mm,
because you're not making a rational cognitive choice to do these things.
right.
Your physiology is leading those. So like what they say in the polyvagal world is like your story follows your state. And so I think that's what's so critical is like, and kind of that's the intersection that we're talking about.
Right.
We tend to think, because we live in this cognitive centric culture, that the story we tell, like, and that's how people interpret affirmations and mindfulness, that like if you tell yourself the right thing, you'll change your physiology.
Right.
um, but oftentimes the reason you show up in therapy and you say certain things is because of your physiological state. So if you're in if whatever state you're in is going to determine both how you communicate and how you're perceived and the actual literal content of what you're
Yeah.
sharing.
And I think I think that this part is that then we say, oh, I said my affirmations, I did my thing, and I still don't feel better. And then that turns into self blame when what you're saying is it's not, your mind's
That's,
out of it.
I mean, that you just basically characterized 80% of people who come to me.
I
Like they're
do.
just like, they're like, I don't know what else to do. They've got these elaborate morning routines.
Mhm.
They're doing everything right. I mean, I feel so deeply for them. Like, oh my gosh, you are like, I cannot even believe how much energy, like you're saying,
Exactly.
you're still trying. And it's that trying. And it's like, what if you just don't have to try?
I
And like,
love
what
that.
if you could just like, it's not that it's not quote unquote hard work, but what it is it's starting to develop a relationship with that which feels good,
Yeah.
develop a relationship with that which is pleasurable, because otherwise we're just in that loop again, looping around the thing we think is the problem.
Right.
If we knew what the problem is, we'd have the answer to it. That's
Absolutely.
so we
Absolutely.
don't know what the actual quote unquote problem is.
Well, and then always, I love this idea of like incomplete, going to sleep and then not really feeling rested, overproducing and not really feeling fulfilled. And then it's like, no wonder we're like have needles in our arms and, sugar down our mouth. Like, I think it makes all the sense in the world, which is how I started before we even started today, which was, I just cannot wait to highlight. And I told you, you make me want to be a trauma therapist in my spare time, when I'm not so exhausted. So I just want to ask a closing question, because I think I listen to podcasts like this, and then as you've mentioned, I'm one of these. Like, I think, okay, I have to change my entire life right now, and then I usually like don't do anything. So if you could give me a really one or two or three like ways to start, right? What would you say? I mean, obviously, everybody should buy your book. It's so good. And it's the kind of thing you want to read a lot of times and really get to know. And the exercises, I'm obsessed with it. I could just be your hype squad. But what would you say, other than buying your book, could you tell us like one or two things we could start to do to work on this jaguar energy and getting complete cycles?
Well, first, I would say make sure that the situation that you're in is actually safe. So a lot of people come to me and they want me to make them like sex, or they want me to make them want their relationship, or they want me to help them, quote unquote, regulate their nervous system or feel better. But that would make them maladaptive to the situation that they're in.
Oh, that's good.
So, confirm with yourself if what you're asking is like you very well may be feeling the way that you feel because of the context that we're in.
Right.
I think also just right now in the pandemic, in 9/11, the people who are not traumatized were the people that left the building. They're the people that were able to connect with others and do something.
Yeah.
And that's what the animals can do. They can still move. And right now we're in a collective immobilization. So it seems a little strange to throw out advice that doesn't have anything to do with the fact that we haven't been able to be with many of the comfort measures that we normally have.
I love that.
So especially women, mothers, there's so much of a demand. And so not evaluating ourselves as if that's not happening. And then within it is like moving, doing things like that's, even if it's as simple as, I started this podcast standing up and now I'm sitting down, and, because you can only see me from the chest down, I can still be moving my feet or stretching my hands or doing other things.
That. Yeah. There's like micro self-care. I love that. And I love, you're such like a goal, right? Like you're so in tune with what you need. And like, it sounds like through practice, like, and willingness and sort of attention, that's really possible, which I think is amazing. And I think would reduce cravings pretty significantly, like almost entirely.
I noticed for myself that, when I'm with my boyfriend, I think about food a lot less.
Yep.
That's for me personally. But I don't think thinking about food is necessarily a bad thing either.
Right.
I just think that it's like, I guess I would leave people with this feeling of satiation. So there's a concept in the book called a hold it moment. And a hold it moment it's about receptivity, but it's also about like when something good happens. Like today I finished teaching, I taught an 8 cycle class, and I finished, and it was like this great feeling at the end. Is like, do I just forget that and then go on and like clean my house and like do a million different things? Or do I take a moment, and it could be like 1 minute or 5 minutes, to let that really sink in?
Yeah.
Right. Or like when a compliment comes in, do you just flush it down the toilet, or do you like really hear it and you take it in? So just like you described, a trauma could be a little thing over time. Well, the healing is a little thing over time too. And those positive reparative moments build on each other. And that's what I really want. Like,
yeah,
I had a lot of women take my class, and then they love going to pap smears after that, because now they're telling the doctor exactly the pace that works for them and how they want it. And then the doctor's receptive to it, and they're like, oh my gosh, this was actually like a good experience instead of one where I had to just like check out from it. But that happens by being able to listen to ourselves little by little.
I
And
love that.
I'm just like everybody else. I'm a single mom. I have a book coming out. I have a website that's not finished. That's a mess. I'm trying to stretch my days as long as I can possibly have them. I'm no different. I'm living in this modern culture. I have a mega mission that I'm really attached to in a lot of different ways. But each of us has our own karmic path. Each of us has our own, and we just want to potentiate that. And that's what we have to work with. And also doing it in community, however we can, right?
Absolutely.
Like, we never should have said social distancing. We should have said physical distancing.
Oh God, is that right? I love everything you're saying. I love this idea that healing is a process. If I could only tattoo one thing to people, that's all I'd ever, small goals make to larger goals. I love that you're saying that the record skip is the same for healing as it is for trauma. Like little teeny moments of enjoyment, little teeny moments of celebration all add up. That's a hard one to hear when you're really suffering, but like it's so true. It can't just happen all at once. That's, I think, a really hard pill for people to swallow. But
that's the nervous system, because that's our addiction to intensity. And so we think that it has to be intense in order for it to work, because we're used to that other level of intensity.
Oh, wow.
So that's the refinement, is not requiring that intensity to even perceive that anything has happened.
I love that. Yeah. You say that in the book, the placing value on simple pleasures. That's a really beautiful, apparently I have your book in my memory system, but
thank you.
I was telling you, I really have been doing nothing else except for reading it since I got it. So, you can imagine what my conversations with my loved ones sound like these days, but You're wonderful. I hope this book changes so many lives. I am a big fan of it. I'm a big fan of you. I'm so grateful. You were able to come spend some time with us today. And I look forward to all that you're about to do in this world. So thank you so much for coming on today, Kimberly. Oh, wait, quick question. Oh my gosh. So if anybody's as obsessed with you as I am, they'd want to know where they can find you. So how can people come and hang out with you, even just physically distanced?
You can find me at KimberlyAnnJohnson.com online. I'm also having a live book event April 17th. It's outdoors. So yeah, San Diego.
Okay.
And I'm on the Instagram, so you can find me there.
How could we find you on that?
Kimberly Ann Johnson.
Oh, great. And you have a podcast.
I do. Yeah. My podcast it used to be called MAGA Mama. It's now called Sex, Birth, and Trauma.
Amazing.
We talk about womanhood, relationships, intimacy.
It's really good stuff.
Embodiment.
My whole team's been listening to it all week. We've been listening to everything that you do. So
thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on the show, and thanks for being you.
Thanks for having me.